If someone would have told me 5 years ago in 2020, Lisa, this is going to be the next 5 years of your life, I would never have believed him. Not in a million years. There's no way that I ever would have believed him. I think we're given things not because of the cliche saying, God gives his strongest battles to his strongest warriors or something like that. I don't think it's that. I think it's more when we think, why me? Why not me? Everyone has a story. Everyone has things that they are so proud of that are just fundamental to their core. Things that make them them, things that they love, things that they cherish, that we've gone through. Things that have taught us, mistakes, regrets, all of those things. They all make up each individual that is walking around. And you never know by looking into someone's face or seeing a stranger on the street or a coworker or a member of a charity that you work with. You have no idea behind those eyes the experience that they have had. This is mine. So I want to start off in 2020. I was working in a very large, in fact, the largest primary care office in the city of Atlanta, capital of the South. I was the clinical director of that clinic, but then also the director of training and onboarding. You couldn't get much bigger. You couldn't be on a bigger playing field. And then in January, February, we start hearing about coronavirus. And it wasn't too long being in Atlanta, where the CDC is, that it hit here. And by March of that year, the world changed forever. There's a whole generation now that is defined by a disease. And it certainly defined my perspective on healthcare. It defined my perspective on nursing. And it defined my perspective on me. So as a director, when COVID hit and we're trying to get supplies, we're trying to learn as much as we can. And I was so lucky to work for one of the best doctors in Atlanta. He has since retired. But the things that he instilled in me, the things that other doctors that I worked with in Alpharetta instilled in me, I will never forget the rest of my life. I'll never forget them. They taught me to be compassionate. They taught me to have a healthy fear. But they also told me and taught me that at the end of the day, no matter what happens, the patient has to come first. And that was a special place because, see, I've worked in medicine now for 17 years, and not every place feels like that. Many places focus on metrics. They focus on door-to-door time. They focus on return office visits. They focus on how many times can we get a patient per year to come in the door. They focus on insurance. They focus on numbers, not people. So getting to be a part of that during COVID was very, very special. If you can say in any way that COVID was special. But as a director, when our lab stopped taking blood, swabbing patients, closed down. They would not see COVID possible or COVID positive patients. Then I became what I am, a nurse. Until the pandemic orders were lifted, I took every tube of blood, probably 75% of swabs, and every IV in that building. And I was proud to do it. I put myself voluntarily on the front line with people coughing, throwing up in my face, not knowing what I was going to bring home, not knowing, given my past medical history, am I going to be okay? I did not have the answers, but I knew it was like if you were part of the healthcare system, the machine, during COVID, you know that there was one speed. And it was fast. And it was stat. And it was priority. Because until we really had a grasp on what was going on, this was a death sentence. I'm not going to get into the vaccines. I don't feel like this is the time or the place. I have had COVID twice. I had it just 2 months ago, and I had it in 2021. And I can say whatever is out here now is much worse than in 2021. I can say that. But I'm not going to go into the vaccines, the yay or nay, the good or bad, the conspiracy theories behind it. I'm just not. This is not the place. But I will say, in April of 2021, my company was taken over by a private investment group. The doctor that we so dearly loved well earned his retirement, and things were stressful. Still dealing with the pandemic, still dealing with shutdown, still dealing with, it was the only time that I was glad to drive through Atlanta because there was no traffic. The only people on the roads were healthcare workers, and you could tell. Stethoscopes hanging from the mirrors, parking passes from every hospital, ambulances, first responders, and cops. That's what was on the roads. And I was proud. I was proud of everyone with me in the trenches. My docs, my mid-levels, my nurses, my front desks, my support staff. I was so proud of them because we were such a family until April of 2021. Change is difficult for everyone, and I think this was the very first of a long line of lessons to come over the next 5 years about change and about loyalty is no longer valuable. Money talks, views speak, numbers rule. Not loyalty.
So in 2021, about a year and a half into COVID, I remember it was June of 2021, and I had gone to a baseball game, a Braves game, and gone to dinner after that, and then I went to a hotel because where I lived was on the southeast end of town, and where I work is on the north southwest is where I lived, northeast is where I worked. So it was a really, really long drive. So after going to the Braves game, after going to dinner, I was on call that Saturday. So I stayed in a hotel. And I remember everything was fine, went to the game, great. Went to dinner afterwards and began having just very strange symptoms. I can't really explain it. It was a dizziness. It was not really difficulty breathing. I just didn't feel right. The first time that it happened, I didn't have any chest pain at all. But from June until July 14th, I had 5 episodes like this. And on July 13th, I was doing a jewelry live. And right in the middle of the jewelry live, it felt like, people always say the same thing. I swear, they always say the same thing. But it felt like a 500-pound weight was placed on the front of me and back of me and were squeezing as hard as they could. And I took my blood thinner, I took some aspirin, I took all my medicine, was gonna lay down. It was the worst pain. I mean, I jumped off that live within a second and I'm sweating, but I'm freezing. My son was 15 at the time. So, and we're during COVID. So I, 1, could not leave him alone. 2, could not take him in the ambulance with me. So it was very, I'm like, what do you do? So he was so worried about me. He kept checking on me throughout the night, checking on me. It was really scary. And by that point, I had started projectile vomiting, which is a sign. I had started getting the jaw pain, the left arm pain, all of those things which are a sign of what I was going through. Still, I thought it was maybe a pulmonary embolism, maybe. But I told him, I said, when your dad gets off work, because his dad worked 3rd shift, I said, when your dad gets off work and takes you to school, I will go. So I called my work, his dad got him, took him to school, and I drove to the hospital. And when I saw, being a nurse, when I saw the EKG and what it spit out, that said STEMI, myocardial infarction, left ventricle. And then all heck broke loose. Code blue, wheeling me around like you would see in a movie. Long story short, I go through 2 heart caths within the span of 11 days. So 2 heart surgeries. And the first one they put in a stent and pulled out the clot. The second one was because the arterial wall had collapsed around the stent. So they had to go in and put a bigger stent. Now, that second one, my doctor had fully prepared me. Like, if this doesn't work, if this stent failed, if it didn't work, I'm taking you to emergency bypass surgery at 40. So, it was really scary, very painful. I was terrified when I came out. I was terrified of doing anything, of walking, of going into a store. What if it happens again? What if I just drop dead? I was afraid to go to sleep because I was afraid I wouldn't wake up. I kept myself busy through cardiac rehab, which was 3 times a week. So cardiac rehab, and then doing my little jewelry lives, which we would call heart attack lives, from my bed. So as I said in my last video, I had a lot of issues with my work, And it just, the buyout was not going well. I did not think, people were really, really stressed out. I had the heart attack in July. I was supposed to come back in November to work. I went back in September, which I do not sit well. I am not a sitter. I do not like sitting around being bored. So as soon as my cardiologist gave me the all clear, then we were all clear. That's just, what I was going to do. But I quickly realized, very, very quickly, that the company that I had left when I got sick was not the same one that I returned to. So it was difficult to get used to. And I just felt like there were some changes that I really could not get past. I really couldn't. Some things that were, I don't know. I mean, it's beating a dead horse now, but just some things that I personally didn't like in the direction compared to what I had been used to. So anyway, in December of 2021, I decided to leave that company and started looking for a new position. And I don't know. It's like the second that I stepped out in December, I don't know. And people talk about things like this all the time, but I knew God was putting stuff in motion that I had no idea I had no idea. So I got an interview, big interview. I was so excited. And this company was based out of Nashville, and the opportunity was that I run 5 clinics in the Knoxville area. And I jumped at the chance. I absolutely jumped at the chance. One, I needed a change. I don't think anybody knows how bad I needed something. I was screaming. My body was screaming. I was screaming for something different. And then to get to go back home and do what I love in the process. So I made the move in February of 2022. And, and I just loved it. I mean, I was home. I mean, I knew where I was going everywhere, that's near where I grew up. And my childhood best friend was sweet enough, had a place for me to stay, and loved the people that I worked with, fell right in with them. The only thing that I would say is those first couple of months in Dandridge, I was so lonely, probably lonelier than I'd ever been, but it was in that time frame that I really got to know myself and know what I wanted out of life, what I was seeking, what I was missing. And I mean, I brought my cats up from Atlanta, and that really helped in getting to know people a little bit more. But I didn't know how much my life was going to change. I knew I journaled every night. I knew that I prayed, as I do every night. And this is So in 2021, I'm going to talk right to the camera for the rest of this, I think, because it's, to me, needs to be a kind of intimate conversation. And so I don't want questions or prompting. I'm just going to say this from the heart. So in 2021, I returned back to work in September. Was not supposed to go back until November, but went back in September. And to me, the company that I left was not the same company that I returned to. It just seemed really different. A lot of stress, put on me instantly. And I mean, I know that I rushed back to work. I know that I did. But a lot of stress put on me immediately to hit certain numbers and certain standards and certain KPI, and that's understandable. But quickly I realized that I've got to make a change for a lot of reasons. I've got to make a change in not just my scenery, but my situation. And I left that position in December of 2021. And in February of 2022, God, my hair is everywhere. In February of 2022, accepted a position which allowed me to go home to Tennessee. And I lived in Dandridge. And I absolutely adored the job that I had, the people that I worked with. And, I have always had people around me, always. I went from high school athlete, so there's always teammates around you, there's always people around you, there's always fans around you, to college athlete, which is high school times 100. So there's always fans, kids wanting your autograph, staying after the game with their parents, always teammates around you, always, traveling. I mean, people don't understand that college athletics is a full-time job, and it is. It really, really is. And then as soon as I graduated from college, the week after I graduated, I started my first big girl job. And got married, had Jake, all in very rapid succession. So I never been alone. Ever. Ever. And it used to be one of my greatest fears. And now it's one of my greatest joys, if that doesn't seem too weird. I love being alone now. Me and Bon, Boomer, hang out. Jake's got his own stuff, his own life, and my family, is away. And so I almost crave alone time now. But in May, the first week of May in 2021, oh God, this is going to be really hard to talk about. I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be to talk about this, but here we go. In May of 2021, I was cleaning my bathroom. And I don't know why. I do not know why. I always listen to my, Apple Music, my playlists, stuff like that. I, for the life of me, do not know why I had my phone on YouTube that night. And I was not watching, I was cleaning my bathtub and my shower. But I was listening to music videos on YouTube, and you know, with YouTube, it just keeps playing things that it thinks you want to hear. And I heard this video, this music that I had never heard before, and wasn't really paying attention until like the last 30, 35, 40 seconds. And stopped, and I was like, I've never heard that voice before. And I'm listening to the end of the song, and I'm like, that's pretty deep. So I rewound it, you know, I played it back, and I was instantly blown away. I was just blown away by the words. I instantly wanted to know, like, is this a true story? Who wrote this? And this is good, you know, this is really good. And in a parallel kind of weird way, described a lot of the things that I had been through. You know, I'd always kind of felt like I was put on this earth for somebody else's entertainment. You know, I sacrificed so much, you know, and so that line of, are you entertained? Which, yes, comes from the Gladiator, but I've often wondered that, you know, is it good enough? Is everybody entertained, you know? So that resonated with me, and I listened to it a couple more times, and then went to the video and see this name I've never seen before, Michael Black, and I commented, you know, excellent video. I love it. Love the words. Very deep. You know, just kept it very general, but, you know, I liked it. And that was about all I said. A couple hours later, I get a response. Thank you so much, Lisa. That's so very kind. I appreciate it. Again, very general, very platonic, very, you know, just thank you. You're welcome. That's all it was. I listened to the song. I had no idea who Michael Black was. He had another song on there. I listened to it, liked it. And I sent him another message on YouTube, you know, hey, I hope you don't care. I just shared this out to 18, 15, 13, 15, I don't know how many followers that I had. It comes and goes, but shared it out to Facebook and to Instagram. And he's like, oh my God, you know, thank you so much. You didn't have to do that. I said, well, I really liked it. So, you know, wanted to share it out, give it a like. Hope you don't mind. And he's like, no, not at all. Thank you so much. So I do want to make a correction. When I heard Michael's video for the first time, it was in May, the first week of May 2022. So I do want to edit that real quick and not get the dates wrong. So it was the first week of May 2022, and that's the first time that I had heard Too Much to Think On. Commented on it, really enjoyed it, and I can't tell you who. Maybe he can, I don't know. I know we talked about it later, but who the first one was to communicate on social media. I know that we had both found each other. Let me scoot over a little bit. I know we had both found each other on social media. He does that instantly. anybody that comments on anything, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, whatever, he will go into research mode. And so I know that we had both found each other on social media. I do not, for the life of me, and I'm sure I could look back, who spoke to who first on Facebook, on Messenger. It was probably me. I don't know. But this is still the first week of May, going into maybe the second week of May. And, you know, just normal stuff. You know, hi, nice to meet you. Where are you from? From Knoxville, from Brentwood, near Nashville. Yeah, I know where that is. We just through talking, you know, found out that we graduated the same year of high school, that we were the same height, though that was proven wrong at a later time. Not by me, but I was wearing flats, though, to be fair. But anyway, you know, just very random. Hope you have a great day. You know, are you doing any more music? Just very, very vague things. You know, I always wanted to go to school in Knoxville. What's Knoxville like? Kind of very general, very, I mean, very just innocent, normal conversation. And I sent him a message the morning of May 19th. And it was something like, you know, hope you have a good day. You know, and I knew that he was going through some stressors just because he had told me he was stressed, dealing with an estate and dealing with some family stuff, and that was about all that he said. And the morning of May 19th, I was going to work, and I just sent him, you know, hope you have a good day. You know, hope the day treats you well. Talk to you later. You know, just something extremely generic. And he wrote me back that evening. I had already gotten back from work that night, and said to me, you know, your message really, really helped me today. Thank you for that. I got a call from hospice that my father passed away. And I knew his dad was sick. I knew hospice was involved, but I didn't know. You never expect that. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, I am so sorry. That was the day that I gave him my phone number. And I said, if you need anything, if you need anyone, you need to laugh, you need to scream, you need to yell, whatever you need, give me a call. You know, I know you probably have tons of friends and family, and I knew nothing. I knew nothing yet. But I said, please just reach out, give me a call. I'm here if you need anything. And I didn't hear from him again for a couple of days. And he sent me his father's obituary that he wrote and had me look over it. You know, does this sound okay? Does this sound too much? Does it sound not enough? Is there any typos? You know, what do you think? And I knew nothing about the situation, so maybe I was not the right person to ask. Maybe I was, because I knew nothing yet about the situation that he came from. I knew nothing. I knew that he had 4 children. I knew that he was going through a divorce. I knew that he was going through some stressors with family. And I knew that his dad had just died. That's what I knew. So, I said, it sounds amazing. It looks amazing. Great job. And anyway, he went and did, the funeral stuff, which is always hard, and it feels like you're in a time loop, and it's really, really difficult. A lot of people, a lot of stuff, and grief. And so when he got back from Chattanooga and doing that, he messaged me, and he said, I think you need to know the truth. And because, the whole time I'm thinking Michael Black and his dad's name is something different, but that happens. And he said, I think you need to know the truth. Do you have HBO Max? Yeah. It's a weird question, but yeah, I do. And he said, well, there was a documentary done about my family. Watch episodes 2 and 5. And if you still want to talk, message me back. And I got almost to the end of episode 2 before he messaged me and was like, do you still want to talk? I said, more than ever. Something that I've always told him is that our past does not define us. It teaches us. We learn from experience, but that does not mean that what I did 10 years ago, I need to go do tomorrow. And so got through episode 5 later that night, and this is coming up to Memorial Day weekend. So that Friday before Memorial Day, a lady had hit my car from behind coming down into Westtown Mall, and I just parked. It wasn't bad enough to call the police. There was no dents, no scratches, no anything on either person's car. So I parked my car at Westtown Mall just to kind of, and then get on the road. So I'm sitting in the Westtown Mall parking lot, getting ready to head out. I was off on Monday. That's the first day I'd had off since I had started my new position. And pulled into the mall parking lot because I had to run in and get something. So ran in real quick, came out, and was just sitting there like, oh, that wreck could have been terrible. Like, just kind of sitting there for a minute. And in true, I laugh about it because I got so many of these texts over the years. I don't know. But Michael messaged me, in his style, the phone emoji and a question mark, which I probably got that same message 200 times throughout the next 3.5 years. And I was confused. I was like, did you want me to call you, or are you going to call me? Like, what do we do? And I know he probably thinks like, oh my God, I'm talking to an idiot. But I have never been that nervous in my life. Knowing, and I was like, sure. I'm not doing anything. I was sitting in a mall parking lot. And when that phone rang, my heart was beating out of my chest. felt like I was gonna throw up. And this is someone that I had just had very limited interaction with, very, you know, just innocent conversation with. And why am I feeling like this? And I picked up the phone, and I will never forget what I heard on the other line. I will never forget how I felt. I will never forget the way it made me feel. And I told him that this lady had just hit me from behind. He's like, oh my God, you know. I'm like, no, it's fine. I'm fine. It's all good. And then we proceeded to talk for about an hour. Found out very quickly that we had scary things in common. Things that people should not have in common. Things that most people don't do. Movies that we like a lot of the movies that I love, people hate. Most people hate them, you know. But we were talking, you know, because the lady had just hit me or whatever, talking about cars. And he said, I name my truck, you know, I name my cars, and I named my truck. And this is before the truck that he has now. But I said, oh my God, so do I. I said, that is the weirdest thing. And I was like, my car's name's White Lightning. And you could have heard a pin drop. And he said, you're kidding me. He said, there's no way you could have known that. And I'm like, you know, what do you mean? And he said his truck's name was Black Thunder. And stuff like that went on the entire 3.5 years. Stuff that, just weird stuff that we have in common. So much so that it was unbelievable sometimes. I mean, it really, really was almost scary, you know? But, you know, we talked about music, and we talked about the weekend, and I said, I'm just gonna be driving, you know? If you feel like calling, you know. And so we talked for about an hour. I'd gotten on the road. We talked 1 or 2 times during the weekend, but for only a few minutes. And really the defining call, I feel, of my life that really solidified how I felt about this guy. The different person that I know, what he's capable of, what he was early on to me, and I think why I have such a hard time reconciling with how it ended, the cowardly, lying, manipulative way that it ended. It's because that is not the person that I knew. That is not the person that I knew. The person that I knew was kind, was compassionate, was humble, so talented, loving, supportive, everything that you would want. And so I'm coming back from Memorial Day, and I could kind of tell that he missed me. And we stayed on the phone that entire 6-hour and 20-minute drive from North Carolina to Knoxville, right outside Knoxville. And then stayed on the phone for another 3 hours. It was the longest phone call that I've ever had in my entire life. And neither one of us wanted it to end. It was a 9-hour phone conversation, over 9 hours. Because when I got home, we watched a movie together. And we would do this all the time with TV and movies, and we would sync it up, start it at the same time. I would always be a little bit ahead, so he would catch it up, and then we'd sit there and watch a movie together, 3 hours away. But, you know, in the early days, we had to do that because he was still married. And I knew that, and he knew that. And skipping forward a little bit, you know, we watch TV together all the time, probably watch 30 movies. You know, we'd hang out Friday night or Saturday night, and I just had the best time with him. Laughing, and Talladega Nights night was fun. That was a good one. And there's movies that I introduced him to. There's movies that he introduced to me. But we always had so much fun just laughing and talking. And I never called him Michael Black. Ever. Because I knew Michael Shamblin. So during that Memorial Day conversation, we sent each other a song, and the one he sent me, I'll always remember. I've put it on Facebook several times. That's why, you know, my Facebook messages don't just not mean anything. They mean something. If I post something other than just giving out general information or blood clot information, it means something. And he sent me a remake of Neil Young's Harvest Moon. I was driving, and he said, "Can I send you a song that makes me think about you?" And I said, "Of course, yeah." And I said, you know, I was listening to this album with my young niece, and this weekend I said, I'd like to send you one too. And I sent him a song by Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran. And Ed Sheeran is very important later in the story, probably in part 2 or 3. It will become very important. And so anyway, called Everything Has Changed. Because my life was going in a trajectory of work and, you know, be by myself for a little while and, you know, learn to be, you know, independent. And I did do all those things. I did learn all those things. But almost from the very beginning, you know, he was still living in the house that he first left to when he left Remnant. And so we're both completely on our own and going through a huge adjustment period. And it's like, anyway, to me, it was like God said, I'm not going to let you do this alone. And, you know, Michael was there to hear every fear, every dream, the things that I wanted out of life, the things that I needed out of life. You know, I had just become heavily involved with the National Blood Clot Alliance and, you know, started doing my first few events, and he was, you know, started to become pretty well known in that community, and he was instrumental in giving me advice as to, be like Esther. Don't be the first one to speak up. Let everybody lay their cards out, before you lay yours. But one of the things that really stood out in my mind was, it was near the fall. It was coming towards the fall, so maybe the end of summer. And, he was, it was coming close to the end of the divorce. And he called me one day and he was so upset. He was so upset. And I'm like, what is going on? And he was like, it's the girl's birthday today. And, I think my ex is seeing somebody else. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you know how you can take live photos? I'm like, yeah, a lot of my photos are live. And he said, in one of the photos, there was either a guy talking or a guy in the background that he, thought he recognized. And God strike me dead if I'm lying. We were sitting there talking about it, and I'm like, maybe that's just a friend. Maybe that's one of their friends. You never know. It's their birthday, And he said, I can't really be mad at Aaron. And I said, okay, why not? And he said, because look at what I'm doing with you. He said, so I really don't care. And I just remember that being a very pivotal statement in what ended up being a 3.5 year, whatever it was. I know what I think it was. He would probably disagree. And say it was nothing. Because now knowing the truth, a lot of the truth that I did not know, I truly believe the first 6, 8, 9 months, whenever it was, he put a, halt to everything for the first time, the first of 5 times, which was in very late October, because we went through Halloween and decorating all that stuff together, and I was getting ready to come down there. So that was the first halt. There was 5 of them. And anyway, I'm going to get more into that in part 2. But for part 1, I will just say, that was a very pivotal statement for him to make. It meant a lot to me that he said that. Do I have it recorded? No, I didn't record our conversations. Absolutely did not. None of them, not one, unless he asked me, Lisa, record the lightning. Lisa, while we're on FaceTime or something. Or Lisa, record the thunder. Or, something like, or record the fireworks or whatever. I never recorded one conversation that we had. Otherwise, I would let them play and let them do all the talking. So my memory has to act for those conversations. But that was something huge that he said early on that made me think, like, this person really cares about me. And for the first 6, 8 months, he really did. And it is more love, more compassion, more pride, more support than I've ever been given in my life. But I want to tell you, people change. And people change for the worst reasons. And I know, again, hurt people hurt people. And there's so much trauma there. But that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse to lie to people. That's not an excuse to hurt people that you claim to have once loved. So, on the next segment, there'll be 3 segments to this. On the next segment, we're going to get into the first kind of moment of silence and the disappointment of planning to see each other for the first time and it not working out, which was a cycle. So, and now I know why, but I will share that in part 2. This is part 1. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I will post part 2 probably on Wednesday. So I love you guys. Thank you for your support.